Paul and I are here in freshwater Carbonear this morning. The islands that you see directly behind me, the first one is called Maidner Island, and the further one out is Carbonear Island. And just over here to my right, there used to be a local community wharf, and it was from there that fishermen would go out with their traps and their trawls and their nets and fish these grounds behind me. And the fishing grounds behind me, they have some interesting names as well. There's Salmon Rock, and there's the Golden Cup, and there's the Dark Gulch out there as well. And a wonderful fisherman that used to live just up this way here, by the name of Andrew Parsons, he would tell me stories about fishing out here. Like in the fall of the year, there were trawl berths like the Offer Ledge. And he said sometimes we would take a stove and an iron pot with us. And during the day, when it was coming on lunchtime, one man would be pulling the trawl, and then the other would be getting a lunch ready. And in the iron pot, he would put some fat pork, and then there was some potatoes, and then there was a fish right out of the ocean that was put in that pot. And sometimes they would even put a little bit of salt water to add some flavor to it. And when the time was right, and it was cooked, they would move in behind close to Carbonear Island, and it wasn't too windy in there, and then they would eat their lunch. And they had a name on it. It was called steam tarred fish. And later on in the day, when they would come back in here to the wharf to process their fish, well, young people would climb down off the wharf into the boat, and they would be looking for some leftover steam tarred fish. In the last chapter of John's Gospel, there's this beautiful story of Jesus who he cooks up a breakfast on the beach. That happens to be fish, and it happens to be bread. And his guests, well, they were still out in boat, and they were making their way to shore. And this was Peter and Nathaniel and Thomas and the sons of Zebedee. And they had come up to Galilee from Jerusalem. They had followed the crucifixion of Jesus, and they heard these reports that somehow Jesus was alive, but it was too much for them. They just had to go back home and to do what they did best, and that was fish. And so they fished all night, and they didn't catch anything, and they were making their way to shore. And as they were making their way to shore, well, they saw this man on the beach, and he was calling out to them, Did you get any? Did you get any? In Newfoundland, he would say, earn, and of course in the boat they said, no, we didn't get any, or nern, we didn't get nern. And so he began to say, well, throw your net on the other side. Throw your net on the other side. It seemed rather foolish to them that they would actually throw the net on the other side, because this wasn't a time for fishing. But anyway, they did. And lo and behold, a miracle. The net was full, and then someone suddenly said, well, that's Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, there on the beach. And then there was a mad scramble to get to shore to be with him. And then something very special happened there on the beach, around that little fire, around the breakfast of fish and bread. Jesus began to talk to his friends. These were the guys that had deserted him. Peter had denied him. Yet Jesus didn't rebuke them. He didn't chastise them. He didn't preach any sermons. He encouraged them. He challenged them. And then he sort of renewed their mission as to what they were to do. You know, this is where Jesus was at his best. Just like the last meal he had before he went to the cross. Again, no sermons. It was around a meal that he challenged and spent time with his followers. Jesus lost his reputation because of all the weird people that he hung out with. Because Jesus used food, and he used interesting places, and he had created a space where transformation of lives could take place. And you know, it's not sermons necessarily, and it's not church necessarily. But it's places like out there behind the island, or over here on the wharf, or up there around a table, or over a coffee, that the revelation of Jesus is most often found. You know, during these days when we're not able to be in church every week and we're not able to worship like we used to, you know, is it possible that God is teaching us something during these times that is not always about sermons, which we put a lot of emphasis on, or it's not about worship, or it's not about being in the building? Our God is not a God of temples. Our God is not a God of buildings. Our God is a God who shares meals out behind an island, who has a fire on a beach, who through places of safety, that transformations are made. Maybe that's for us, a message for us as well, that it's where we are, Jesus is. That it's in those spaces and places that we allow transformation to take place. Do I believe that God is teaching us something new during these days of COVID-19 when we're not able to be in church? Absolutely yes. He's teaching us something. And I have one word for that. Hallelujah. Have a blessed week.